It was 30 years ago that I was where you're at. And to think that I'm here now, like, how does that happen? But it happens. And I'm so grateful. I didn't know 30 years ago when I was asked, MOPS was just starting in Carlisle. And I had no idea when I was asked what MOPS was, what I was getting into. But I loved it. And I've had such great friendships. I still see people now. And they're like, hey, remember we were at MOPS table together? And a lot of us would just get together as tables later. We see each other, we might go to lunch. But it was such, I'm so glad that it's still thriving in Carlisle and that you guys have this opportunity, because it definitely was such a blessing to me, just learning how to be a mother, a wife, a friend. So I'm so glad that you guys still have that opportunity. So today, I'm here to talk about marriage. This is us. Randy and I have been married almost 33 years. It'll be 33 in April. And we have 2 children, Derek, who's married to Ellie, and I have 2 sweet little grandsons who I love. They're my little buddies. And I have a daughter, Morgan, who is 27, and she is the events coordinator at the Chamber of Commerce. So some of you may know her or not. So like I said, we were married 33 years. Randy and I met in college. We were both involved in Campus Crusade, which is now Crew. And we started dating in 1987, which seems like a long time ago. We were married in 1989, or I'm sorry, we were engaged in 1989, and then we were married in 1990. So, and I'll talk about this because it was 3 years that, you know, I dated Randy, and so you think, you know each other, like it's, you know, marriage is gonna be easy, like you know everything about each other. But I didn't. So one of the things I'm gonna say is Randy and I both came from Christian families, so we had a really good view of what marriage looked like, a good foundation. So in that respect, we are blessed with that. So today, I'm basically here to share with you what I have learned, what we have learned over the past 23 years, and honestly, we're still learning. This is what we've done to foster our marriage. I say, you know, we actually kind of like each other most days. We love spending time together, doing things together, but it was what we did for all those years to foster that relationship is why I can stand here today and say, you know, this is why we are at this point that we are. So let me start off by saying a lot of people don't want to hear this, and I went into marriage very naively. Randy and I did not have marriage counseling, so everybody around us was like, you guys are the perfect couple. You guys are meant for each other. You guys are, you know, everything's just going to be great. So no marriage counseling, and walking into it very naively, thinking that, wow, it's just going to be great. I have to say that marriage takes work, and a lot of times, I don't know, I don't think we really want to hear that, or we don't want to have to think that we're going to have to work through this. It takes intentionality, sacrifice, study, and commitment. And what do I mean by study? And basically, study is you learn, you read books. This is, you know, we read books, we were in small groups with others, we listened to sermons on marriage. So that, you know, when you're going through a rocky time, there's pretty much, now you guys have access to so many wonderful things like Focus on the Family podcast, a lot of different blogs that are Christian based. So you have a lot of opportunity to listen and to fill your mind with those things, and that's what we did. That's what I did. I would say that I did a lot of reading of married books, and then I would say, hey, can I share with you what I just learned or what I just heard? There were times we did it together, but for the most part, I would say that I was the one who, because I enjoyed that. I enjoyed reading. And so I would read something or listening to something, and then I would say, hey, do you want to listen to this with me? So that's what it means by study. A great and successful, when I say great and successful, it's just a flourishing marriage doesn't just happen. Rarely, if ever, do 2 people fall in love and then just live happily ever after. When we were dating engaged, I think a lot of us have the misconception that this is just, we're gonna be different. Our marriage is gonna be different. We have this, you know, it looks like, you know, like we get along so well. We love doing these things. But then basically life happens, your careers happen, family dynamics come into play, financial stresses, all of these things. And it starts to look like, wow, this isn't what I thought marriage would look like. Most of the time it happens subtly. So it's not like, oh wow, this just happens overnight. It happens subtly, you drift apart. There's miscommunications and misunderstandings, and it starts to just chisel away at your foundation, at the foundation of marriage. I think we need to be aware of this, because I think a lot of times we start in our heads, and Satan loves to use this like, I think I married the wrong person. I don't really think we're really meant for each other. And when Satan can get us in our minds on that path and to run with it, he loves it. Because when he can, put wedges and destroy and work on couples, he can then split families. And he loves to just destroy what God has designed marriage to look like. So, a successful marriage doesn't just happen, and you have to work at it. And beware of what Satan, it says in the Bible in 1 Peter that he prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. And seriously, you have to be on your guard, because he will love to just put wedges between you and your spouse. In these seasons that are challenging, and I will say, there are seasons to marriage, I feel, and some seasons are easier than others, some are hard. It's in these seasons that you really have to work. You have to become intentional. You have to study, you have to pray, and nurture the most important relationship, which is your marriage. One of the things that was so helpful to me, and I kind of learned this through watching my mother-in-law and just different people around me, is the power and the beauty of prayer. So when I say that, Randy and I are opposites, I say we're 90% opposite, we're 10% the same. So we look at life and how we get to where we're going very differently. Randy is a go-getter, he's an entrepreneur, he's a risk taker, and quite frankly, this scared me half to death. If you kind of are in that situation, So my life growing up was very steady. We lived in the same house. It was very, comfortable. We weren't out looking for the next thing to do or buy or a job change or whatever. So when I then am thrust into this marriage of somebody who I thought I knew, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, like I was scared to death. It scared me. We had been married 4 years, and he decided it was a great idea to sell our house and buy a 7-unit apartment building that his grandparents were selling, and we would live in one of the units and we would be landlords. And I was like who does this? Who wants to do this? So it was scary. And I just remember like trying to talk through with him, and so this is me, I'm throwing a wet blanket. This is what he says, you throw a wet blanket on it. If everybody thought the way you thought, nobody would do anything. And I was like, okay. But what that drove me to was to pray, because honestly, I tell Randy, you could sell ice to Eskimos. They don't even need the ice, and they would buy it from you because he can talk you into pretty much anything, and it all sounds well and good. So I felt like this was just scary, and I would just pray and pray and pray. And when I think back on this and we think about prayer, what better person to go to than the author of marriage and the creator of my husband's heart? Because I can't get there. We see stuff so differently. So by praying, I was able to it gave me a lot of freedom in just laying aside and saying, God, okay, I don't know if we should do this. I don't know. This is scary to me, and maybe it's just me. But what do I do with this? And please, I would pray, God, lead and guide and direct him, and give him wisdom and discernment. And I've prayed this for 33 years. If this is not of you, close the door, like slam it shut. Because if you leave it open this much, he can make things happen, and he'll make it happen. So that's been my prayer all through 33 years. Like, if this is not of you for our family, close the door, slam it shut. Don't, like, make it not happen. Make it not able to happen. So that really, honestly, gave me a lot of freedom and peace, that I no longer had to be the sole person holding the reins and being the sole person throwing a wet blanket on everything. And for you, like, you know, everybody, this looks different for everybody and what you're working through and struggling through, or what you are at odds about. But I will say that, you know, praying has really been a lifeline for me, and even for both of us. It's just been something that has given us peace, and we pray about things when we're at odds about things, and most of the time, through prayer and just talking through it, we end up somewhat on the same page, which is kind of amazing and a blessing. So today, just some things that I want to talk about, and they're just like examples from our marriage. I'm coming to you this morning not as a marriage expert, but a marriage guinea pig. Like, these are things that we learned together, and it's by trial and error, and it's just through years of working at that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is communication, which, when I say communication, there's like so many different ways you could go with this. But the first thing I'm going to start out with is that we cannot read each other's minds. Like, your spouse cannot read your mind, and I cannot read Randy's mind. He cannot read my mind. So you have to be able to communicate. You have to be intentional. And a lot of times it just seems so obvious. Like, they don't get it, like they don't see this. But seriously, they don't. And so you have to be able to communicate this and say what you're thinking, what you need, what are your expectations. For example, the example I'll give is, I just remember years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom. Randy was working very long hours, and like he would come home, and you know, you've had a long day. You're just like ready to be like, okay, have at it, take the kids, go wherever you want. But the trash would be like full, and it would be practically falling all over the floor. And so I would be like, did you see the trash? Like, did you take the trash out? And he'd be like, oh, no, but if you need me to do that, just ask me. Just ask you? You don't see that? Like, are you blind? But these are just things that he was just like, just ask me, I'll do it. So then that leads into tone of voice and timing. And I think if there's anything today, because I feel like this is an area that I've had to just relinquish over and over and over, is tone of voice. How am I asking? How am I responding? Because, you know, you get frustrated and you see the obvious, you state the obvious, and then it's your tone of voice. And I think because this is something I deal with and have to just take to the Lord and ask for forgiveness from Randy, but there are a lot of Bible verses, which at some point I probably have these on my mirror or somewhere. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Colossians 4:6, let your speech at all times be gracious and pleasant. And Proverbs 16:24, pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweet and delightful to the soul and healing to the body. So it's gentle, it's gracious, it's pleasant words. And so I learned that when I used pleasant words and when I was not being disrespectful, things went a lot more nicely. And like I'll say, I still deal with this. Just last week, I'll give you an example. my daughter is going to be in a wedding, and so all week we were talking about the shower that was going to happen on Saturday, and I was helping her with it, and we had gone shopping for the stuff, and the shower's on Saturday, and I'm helping with the shower, da, 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 da. And so Saturday morning, he's like, where are you going? He's like, where are you going? And he's like, can you do this? And I said, no, I have him in a shower today. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know your schedule. We've been talking about this. So my response, and so I really had to step back, and in the heat, I can just hear it in my head, Tracy, don't say that, don't roll your eyes, don't act out of frustration, because a lot of times, that's what we do, and then, how does he answer me? But defensively, and then I answer back defensively. So it goes nowhere, and it can get just ugly quickly. The other thing I'll say that I learned is timing in bringing things up. And I don't want to say this to say, hey, just don't deal with things and push it under the rug, but I learned that there's a good time sometimes to bring things up, and there's a time when it's not so good. And so if I wait, and when the timing is better, like for instance, when they come through the door at night, it's probably not a time to just dump everything on them and tell them and ask them a bazillion questions and what are we gonna do about this and da 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 da. I learned, and I had heard this through a speaker, make them want to come home, make them want to come to be home at night. Ask them, how was your day? And a lot of times it's just good, bad, whatever. So then ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your day? Because then they can say, and if you don't have time to discuss what was a 3 or whatever, you can revisit that. That just shows that you care about them, you care about their day. And I keep saying this as to your husband, but a lot of us are feeling that we might be feeling that same way, they really don't care, they don't ask me, they don't care how my day was, they don't want to know. So I would say to just pray about that and just be open and honest and say, could you just ask me how my day was? They probably can tell by the look on your face and how you're reacting, but it goes both ways. And so they're not going to they can't read your mind, they don't know what your expectations are, so you have to be open and honest about those things and say, you know what, I need you, can we just sit down later and talk about our day? Or whatever. But the timing, and I will say that a lot of times our conversation gets heated, and to just step back and not continue that, because just say, you know what, let's just step back, and you want to spout the last thing, or he wants to spout the last thing, and just stepping back from that and just taking a breath and revisiting that later has been a huge help in our relationship, to just not have to have the last word, and because a lot of times those little things that are irritating us and that have caused this, if you step back and you look, it really wasn't as big of a deal as we took it. And so by stepping back and running an errand or going for a walk or just not dealing, just saying, you know what, let's just talk about this later, it tends to dissolve itself. Is what I found. Now again, if it's in conflict and these are things you need to discuss, I don't want to just say, well, just push those under the rug and don't deal with it. But it's the things that are more nuisances and irritations that we can let go, and in the grand scheme of life, it's not really that big of a deal to end up in this blown out fight. The other thing I'll say with that is night owls and morning people, because I watched this in my home, Derek and Morgan growing up, and Derek was a morning person, Morgan is a night owl. So in the morning, when it was time to get ready to go to school, and they're sitting there eating breakfast and they're driving to school together, Morgan looked and acted like a bear. And Derek would just be like, hey, Morgan, and talking to her, and she'd be like, and he'd say, Mom, she's so mean driving to school. She's just so, and so just to learn, if you're not a morning person, or your husband isn't, or vice versa, just allow them that time, because a lot of times, what does it leads to irritation. It leads to not talking so nicely, and then you're off to your days and you've not communicated very nicely first thing in the morning. So I think timing, just learning when to talk and not to talk, and so much, that wasn't so much an issue for Randy and I. We were both morning people, so that wasn't a huge deal for us, but I will say, just I know when is a good time to bring something up to Randy that we have to discuss, and I know when it's not. And so just heeding that and being like, okay, I'm not gonna bring this up right now, even though it was like, you want to bring it up. So timing. Our spouses need to know that they are respected and loved, thought of. They need to know that we're for them, and we need the same things. You tend to do this a lot in the dating phase. Like you're definitely like, they know you're loved. You do all kind of things. You talk, you have more time to talk, all of those things. And then, you know, like I said, life happens and you're in a different spot, and basically trying to communicate is sometimes very difficult. And so we tend to let this go by the wayside, because, you know, you've been married for 5 years. They know you love them. I know Randy loves me. But it's being intentional, and you have to do that. For instance, do you tell them that you're proud of them? Say, I really respect how you handle that situation, because a lot of times we're seeing these things in them, but we're not telling them that, wow, I really admire how you handled your mom when she called, or whatever it could be, or how you handled that situation with the neighbor. Do they know that you see those things and that you respect how you saw them handle that situation? If they're doing things with the kids, like, I love how you play with the kids, or how you do this with the kids. When we first moved to our one neighborhood, because we moved several times, our kids were younger, and there was a lot of boys in the neighborhood, and we had big yards, and the boys would always come over to get Derek to go play, and they'd knock on the door, and they're like, "Can Derek and Randy come out to play?" And so I would say to him, like, you are so good with them. Like, they love hanging out with you. Like, you're just, and he would do it. He would take the time, he would go out with them, they'd play football, they'd play kickball, whatever. So when your husband is doing those things, are you saying, like, that's, like, I love that. I love that the neighborhood boys want to come and play with Randy too. Saying in front of others things that you see that your spouse is good at. I have to say that, like, Randy was always very good about that. And it wasn't in a conversation where it was just brought up, but it flowed with the conversation, and he would say, yeah, Tracy's really good at such and such. Tracy's really good at, you know, she loves talking to women and meeting women and that type of thing. And vice versa, when he was doing that for me, then that made me want to also point out the things that he's a very good mediator. He can bring two people together, talk through things. He's very discerning. So I would say that to other people. We were talking and it warranted that. I'd say, no, he's a very, that's just one of his gifts. Randy's a very good mediator. So as we speak into them, it tends to motivate them and want them to do those things even more. And again, if you're somebody who you're feeling, you know, disappointed in this area about that your husband never says those things, again, he can't read your mind, he doesn't know. You could say and pray about it first, and just like, God, I want to bring this up, so provide a time for me to bring this up, and that we can talk about this, and that he can see that I need this, and that this is important to me. The next thing is spouses. So we need to realize and know that our spouse comes before our children. And that is hard when your kids are little, I feel, because children are needy. And so you're spending all your time with them. But just making time that, and it might be in the evenings, like we're gonna put the kids together and we're gonna have ice cream together, or we're going to, knowing that, you know what, yes, the kids are my priority. They are demanding a lot right now. And trust me, that gets easier as you go. They are not as needy. And you do have more time to spend with each other. But putting your spouse above your children. And like I said, that can be difficult. But you have to, that's one of the things you have to be intentional about and make it a priority. So that, believe it or not, your kids grow up, I can remember in high school when our kids got older, they're doing their things, they're working, they were really involved in the youth group here at church. And so I remember we had this Saturday and we didn't have anything to do. And Randy was like, well, what do you want to do today? And I was like, I don't know, I heard about this Longwood Gardens. I'm like, could we go check it out? And he was like, a garden? Okay. So we did it, and we loved it, and he ended up, something that he was like, okay, whatever, I'll go to this garden because Tracy wants to go to this garden. He loved it, and he's like, let's buy a year membership so we can come back every season. I was like, okay. But, you know, there comes a time, and if you're not nurturing and you're not having that building into that relationship when your kids get to high school, when they leave for college, when you're now empty nesters, which you think will never happen, it does, where will your relationship be? So because we had nurtured, we enjoyed spending time together and doing those things together. The next thing is we need to intentionally restrain from pushing each other's buttons. So I think you learn this as you go. You learn every marriage looks different. What are the things that you know if you do, you bring up, you go there, it's going to cause anger, it's going to cause issues. And for me, I can remember saying, like, certain things Randy did that would push my buttons. It's like, you just like well up inside. It's like it brings up anger. And so you need to learn to restrain from those things and not, to work on not going there if you know that will push their buttons. For instance, Randy would hate in the early part of our marriage when I would use you never or you always. That would push his buttons. And I was like, okay. And because this is what he would say to me. He'd say, Tracy, I did that 2 weeks ago. You say I never do it, I did it 2 weeks ago. I was like, okay. So those are very strong words. You never do this, you always do this. And in reality, maybe it would have been better to say, I haven't seen you do this lately, or you rarely do it, as opposed to you never and you always. So I learned, and it's hard, you have to really work at that, but I learned to not say never and to not say always. When in fact, it was something that he did do occasionally, it just wasn't as much as I wanted him to do it. So that was an area where, provoking each other to anger. Okay. The other thing I'm going to say is it's really important who you surround yourselves with. Randy and I, we've been at CEFC for as long as we've been married, so we've been here 33 years. So we have been involved in lots of small groups and just couples that were godly and that poured into us through the years. And we've done ministry with people. And I will say that it's really important who you surround yourself with, because if you're surrounding yourself by friends or coworkers or neighbors who are husband bashing, it's easy to, when your day is not going great, to just hop on the bandwagon and just to it fills your mind with all kinds of negativity, and it leads you down paths that are paths that you don't want to go down. So I feel like, you have a lot of opportunity. If you see somebody who is a little bit older than you in your marriage, or you see another couple and you really respect what their marriage looks like talk to them, meet with them, go to dinner. Randy and I we have so many friends that are just all over the gamut, younger people, older people, couples that we still get together with, that we've maybe done ministry with 10 years ago. But those are people that breathe into us, and model what marriage looks like at every stage. So I would say that that's really important. I would say to pray for a hedge of protection around your marriage, around your mind, because Satan loves to just put wedges between you and your spouse. Okay, intentionally building into our marriage, you have to nurture this. And I like to look at it as like a flower bed or a garden. For that garden to flourish and to be beautiful, you have to do the digging, you have to do the pruning, you have to study up on plants, you have to talk to people who do landscaping. I don't know if you could know Jack Yingling, he does a lot of landscaping here at the church. We have a wedding venue, so landscaping is really important at the venue. So I have Jack on speed dial, and I'm like, Jack, what do I do with this plant? What do I do? So I'm seeking out somebody who's an expert in that area. And so I would say the same thing, like you have to nurture it. For your marriage to flourish and look beautiful, you have to take care of it. It's a work, it's a continual work in progress. And I will say that it gets easier as you go along because we've matured, we've grown in our relationship with Christ. So, like I said, most days we like each other, but after 33 years, I can't sit up here and say, oh, it's easy, we get along great, we don't have any issues, because we're sinful people and we're selfish people, and so those things get in the way, and so you're still working at it. But it gets easier. Would you say it gets easier in your marriage, and you become friends again. How did we nurture our marriage? We planned date nights. We were very earnest in doing that, and what that looks like at every stage of life is different. So it might mean that, hey, Friday night we're putting the kids to bed at 7:30 and we're going to eat our favorite ice cream and we're going to watch a movie, or we're going to do this, but just planning time to be together, not where you have to discuss things, but just being together. Planning fun things. A lot of times you do all these fun things while you're dating, and then boom, you get married, you have kids, and you don't have fun anymore with each other. You don't do things that you used to enjoy. So just make time to do those things. And again, it looks different as you move along in your marriage, just because of the ages of your children. But I would say definitely, when Rainey and I were dating, like I said, we met in college, and so we loved to play cards. And so we would just play cards all the time. And now, every now and then I'll say, do you want to play cards? I'm like, no, I don't want to play cards. But like, we like, do you want to play cards? No. Or sometimes we do, but it's just, that was one of the things that we did in our dorm rooms. We played cards, and that was just fun and something that we enjoyed doing. One thing that we always did is we always made I want to say a big deal about our anniversary, but we always celebrated our anniversary, whether it was just going to dinner. Maybe it was, and I think back on when Derek and Morgan were 1 and 2, I don't remember what we did for an anniversary. But I do know that it was something that I looked forward to. We did things, we made our anniversary special. We would, go to dinner. We would go to dinner and a movie. We would sometimes have, my parents aren't in the area, so Randy's parents were really good about keeping our kids overnight. We might, go do something overnight. We would go to Lancaster or whatever. As the time went on, I remember our 10-year anniversary, we did a 4-day cruise. And now we spend 10 days usually over our anniversary in Florida. That's just the stage of life we're in. But I look forward to that. Like after 33 years, like I just love that we are making that time, we're making that day, and it doesn't have to be on the day, but just even if it's the weekend after, the weekend before, that was always special, and that meant a lot to me that we put that effort forward and that we did that. Celebrate the small things. Like a lot of times we just let small things, like whether it's a job promotion or basically you made it through the week, whatever. Like just, I would just remember like thinking Friday nights, or growing up, Friday nights is like, whoa, Friday night, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and it's like Friday night was like, so plan something. A Friday night, like say, hey, let's go get pizza, let's go up Bryson, let's go for a hike. In the summertime, if you have a fire pit, plan to put the kids to bed and sit around the fire pit. Just those things, like celebrating the small things. It doesn't have to be big, but just celebrating the small things. And then take advantage. We took advantage a lot of the great resources that we had. This was a book I dug off my shelf. This is a book that we did with a small group. It's called His Needs, Her Needs. You guys have so many resources, like I said, because you now have podcasts and you don't have to listen. I used to have to listen to Focus on the Family when it happened because I couldn't get it any other way. But they just have so many great talks on marriage, seminars. Randy and I often did a marriage seminar that was maybe 2 days. We used to do them here at the church. We did them at other churches. But just taking that time and taking that day and a half or that day to just go and listen to somebody, like those resources were very, very beneficial to us. And like I said, it takes work. And if I don't know where you're at today. I don't know where your marriage is at. I don't know what you're thinking, but I will say that if you feel like you guys need a counselor, that I would definitely seek out a godly Christian counselor to help you walk through the season that you're in, because sometimes you're at odds and you can't come together. So I would say to definitely do that. Talk to other couples. I know that like I would talk sometimes to other women who were Christians. Randy would talk to other men, just to help us through seasons that were just difficult and we're not on the same page. And that's okay, and it's there for you, and I feel like we need to take advantage of that. So pretty much, like as I was preparing this talk, I thought, there's so many things you can talk about on marriage. But I hope that like some of these tidbits that I've given you and things that we've learned are helpful to you. I've written down some questions that you can discuss at your tables. I will be around if you want to talk specifically about something that maybe you're dealing with or going through or that type of thing, or just to pray with you if you feel like this is something I need prayer for. So I will hang out and be around if anybody wants to talk to me. I will do that. But you guys, hopefully this has just been an encouragement to you and gives you hope to keep persevering and keep pressing on, because it's so worth it. It's so worth it to walk through those. You also become stronger and you become closer as a couple when you've worked and dealt through and gone through things that you've worked out together. So thanks.